The secret came out on a rainy Thursday afternoon, in the middle of a conversation that was supposed to be about something else. No one in my family woke up that morning expecting the past to split open. No one imagined that by the end of the day, the story we had all been living inside for 20 years would no longer make sense. But that is how family secrets work. They do not disappear. They wait. For most of my life, I believed my family was ordinary. We were not rich. We were not especially dramatic. We were the kind of family that stayed quiet, handled problems privately, and told the outside world that everything was fine. And for a long time, I believed that was true. If you had asked me who held our family together, I would have said my mother. She was patient, practical, and careful with her words. She never raised her voice unless something was truly wrong. She kept birthdays organized, bills paid, and arguments from getting out of control. She was the emotional structure of our home. If you had asked me who carried the authority in our family, I would have said my father. He was not a cruel man. He was disciplined, reserved, and impossible to read when he chose not to speak. He believed in routine, reputation, and keeping private matters inside the family. For years, I mistook that for strength. Then there was my older sister, Claire. She was 5 years older than me and spent most of my childhood acting like a second parent. She was protective in a quiet way. Not affectionate, exactly, but watchful. Even when she moved away for college, I still felt like part of her attention stayed behind with me. I was the youngest. That meant I grew up inside answers other people had already accepted. By the time I was old enough to notice tension in the room, most of it had already become normal to everyone else. Silences at dinner, conversations that stopped when I walked in. At the time, I did not think much of it. Every family has strange rhythms. Every family has stories they repeat and stories they avoid. I assumed ours was no different. That assumption lasted until the year I turned 28. The trigger for everything was my grandmother's funeral. She was my mother's mother, and for most of my life she had been the one person in the family who spoke with unsettling honesty. She was not warm in the traditional sense, but she was never fake. If she disapproved of something, you knew it. If she loved you, you felt it in practical ways. When she died, the family gathered the way families always do when they have unfinished history. People arrived carrying flowers, casseroles, old resentments, and the version of themselves they preferred others to see. The house became crowded with polite grief. Conversations floated between memory and logistics. No one cried loudly. My family was not built that way. Claire arrived late that afternoon. She had driven in from another state with her husband and daughter. From the moment she walked in, I could tell something about her was off. She hugged my mother tightly, but when my father stepped toward her, she hesitated. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. At first I assumed it was stress. Funerals force people back into old emotional roles. They stir up things no one has named. Still, there was something in Claire's face I could not ignore. She did not look sad. She looked resolved. That evening, after most of the relatives left, the 5 of us sat in the living room. My mother was exhausted. My father had his usual unreadable expression. Claire sat straight-backed in the armchair near the window, as if she had come prepared for something. I sat beside my mother, waiting for the room to return to normal. It never did. My mother mentioned that my grandmother had left a small box of personal papers to be sorted later. She said there were probably old bills, letters, and legal documents no one had wanted to deal with. Claire asked, very calmly, whether she had already seen what was inside. My mother said no. Then Claire said something I will never forget. She said, "Before you open it, there's something I need to say." The room changed immediately. Even my father looked at her differently. Not confused. Not curious. Alert. That was the first moment I understood that whatever was coming was not new to everyone in the room. Claire looked at my mother first, then at me, then, finally, at my father. Her voice stayed level when she spoke, which made the words hit even harder. She said, "I think Grandma wanted the truth to come out after she was gone." My mother frowned and asked what she meant. Claire did not answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. It was old, folded, and handled enough times to show that it mattered. She placed it on the coffee table like something dangerous. My father said her name once, low and controlled. It was not a question. It was a warning. Claire ignored it. She said she had found the letter years ago. Not recently. Not by accident last week. Years ago. And she had carried it ever since, trying to decide whether the truth would destroy the family or save it from a lie. My mother was already shaking before Claire opened the envelope. The letter was from my grandmother. It was handwritten and dated 20 years earlier. I remember that detail because Claire read the date aloud, and the year hit me like a physical thing. 20 years. Long enough to become part of the structure of a life. Claire did not read the full letter at first. She only read one paragraph. One paragraph was enough. It said that the child my mother believed she had miscarried had not died. The baby had been born alive. For a moment, no one moved. My mother stared at Claire as if the sentence itself had no meaning. I looked at my father because some instinct told me his face mattered most in that moment. And what I saw there made my stomach turn. He did not look surprised. He looked cornered. My mother asked Claire what she had just said. Claire repeated it more slowly. She said Grandma had written that my mother was told the baby had died during a complicated delivery. But according to the letter, that was not true. The baby survived. My mother kept shaking her head. She said that was impossible. She said she had been told by the doctor and by my father that the baby was gone. She said she had held that grief in her body for 20 years. Claire's next sentence was even worse. She said the letter claimed our father had known. Silence followed in the ugliest form I have ever experienced. Not the silence of shock alone. The silence of pieces rearranging themselves inside people all at once. My mother turned toward my father slowly, as if even the act of looking at him required effort. She asked him whether it was true. He did not answer. That non-answer told us more than words could have. My mother stood up so fast the lamp beside her nearly fell over. She asked him again, louder this time. Had he known the baby was alive? Had he let her believe, for 20 years, that she had lost a child who was actually out there somewhere? My father said her name the way people do when they want to calm a situation without addressing it. That made everything worse. Claire said, "Don't do that. Don't start managing the room now." It was the first time I had ever heard her speak to him with open contempt. And suddenly I understood that this truth had been living inside her much longer than I knew. My mother demanded an answer. Finally, my father said yes. He said it quietly, almost clinically, as though reducing the volume might reduce the damage. Yes, he had known. Yes, the baby had survived. Yes, my grandmother had known too. What happened next came in fragments. My mother crying and then going completely still. My father trying to explain that it had been complicated. Claire standing up and refusing to let him soften any of it with vague language. And me sitting there, feeling my own life change shape without fully understanding how. The story, once it started, came out in broken pieces. 20 years earlier, before I was born, my parents' marriage had been under strain. Money was tight. My father's job was unstable. There had also been something no one in the family had ever discussed openly. Another woman. Not a full second family. Not then. But an affair serious enough to threaten the marriage. According to Claire, and later confirmed by the letter, my mother discovered the affair while pregnant. The stress of it all led to complications. She went into labor early. There were medical problems. She was heavily sedated. And while she recovered, a decision was made around her, not with her. The baby, a girl, survived. But my father told the hospital staff he did not want my mother disturbed. He told relatives the baby had died. My grandmother objected, but not strongly enough to stop him. Somehow, through a mix of medical confusion, fear, and pressure, the child was placed for adoption. My mother sat down again when she heard that. She did not faint. She did not scream. She looked like someone whose inner map of reality had just been burned away. All those years of grief, all those anniversaries of loss, all the quiet moments she must have spent wondering about the child she thought she never got to raise. None of it had happened the way she was told. I asked the obvious question. How could something like that happen without her knowing? My father said she had been medicated, emotionally unstable, and in no condition to make decisions. Claire cut him off immediately and said, "You mean she was vulnerable, and you used that?" He did not deny it. Then came the next twist. The child had not simply disappeared into the system with no trace. My grandmother had kept records, not enough to intervene fully, but enough to know where the baby eventually went, enough to know the adoptive family's last name, enough to know the girl had grown up less than 200 miles away. That was the point where the secret stopped being historical and became immediate. This was not just something terrible that had happened 20 years ago. This was a living person, a daughter, a sister, someone who had been part of the world the whole time while we lived as if she did not exist. My father tried to say he believed he was protecting the family. He said my mother had been fragile. He said their marriage would have collapsed. He said he thought a closed adoption and a clean story would allow everyone to move on. Every sentence made him sound smaller. My mother asked him the question that broke the room open again. She asked whether he had ever tried to find her. He said no, not once. Then she asked whether he had ever told the other woman. He looked down. That was answer enough. The affair had ended, he said. The child was not the other woman's. The baby was my mother's daughter. But by then the lie was already in place, and he convinced himself it was better to leave it there. Better for whom became the silent question hanging in the room. Claire finally explained how she knew. When she was 18, Grandma gave her the letter and told her there were truths inside families that rot people from the inside if they stay buried too long. She made Claire promise not to say anything while she was alive. She said my mother was too fragile then and that our father would deny everything unless there was proof. She also said that one day the truth would matter more than the peace. Claire had carried that burden for years. She had tried to convince herself there was no good time to reveal it. Then Grandma died and the promise expired. That was why she looked resolved when she entered the house. She had come prepared to break the family apart if that was what truth required. By midnight, nothing in our home felt familiar. My mother locked herself in the bedroom. My father sat alone in the kitchen, not drinking, not speaking, just staring at the table as if consequences might still be negotiable. Claire and I stayed in the living room with the letter, the envelope, and the weight of a person we had never known. That was the end of the first life of the secret. The second life began the next morning, when we decided to find her. The morning after the truth came out, no one in the house behaved like themselves. My mother did not come downstairs until nearly 10. My father was already dressed, already sitting at the table, already silent. Claire looked like she had not slept at all. I had not either. There are nights after which you do not feel tired. You feel altered. That was how the whole house felt, as if reality had been replaced while we were still inside it. My mother's face had changed overnight. Not older exactly, sharper, more awake, like someone who had spent 20 years mourning a ghost and had just learned the ghost had a name, a birthday, and a life. She said only one thing at first. She said, "We are going to find my daughter." My father tried to say we needed to slow down, that we needed to think carefully, that we had to consider legal boundaries, emotional consequences, and the possibility that the adoptive family might not want contact. He was not wrong in principle, but after what he had done, every practical sentence coming from him sounded like another attempt to control the outcome. Claire took the box of papers from Grandma's room. Inside were old hospital records, notes written in my grandmother's hand, and one document with an agency name partially visible under a fold. Some information was missing. Some had been deliberately removed. But there was enough to start. For the first few hours, the process felt almost absurdly administrative. Phone calls, names spelled out twice, old records requests. A social worker who spoke with the calm distance of someone used to family history arriving in pieces. But beneath all of it was panic. We were not simply looking for a person. We were looking for the life my mother had been denied. And we were doing it with my father still in the house, still part of the search by sheer fact of being there, though no one wanted his guidance. By afternoon, another layer of the truth came loose. The adoption had not been entirely closed. That surprised all of us except my father, who gave away too much with the way he looked down at the table. There had been a provision for future contact through the agency if both parties consented once the child became an adult, which meant my mother might have had options later if she had ever known. That detail broke her in a new way. She did not cry loudly. She whispered, "He took 20 years from me." There was no defense to that. Claire kept pressing. She wanted every detail from our father, every date, every conversation, every person who knew. And slowly, painfully, he gave us more. The doctor had been a family acquaintance. The hospital administrator knew just enough to not ask questions. My grandmother had argued, but not publicly. Shame and secrecy did the rest. I asked why Grandma never told Mom directly years ago. Claire answered before anyone else could. She said Grandma believed the truth might kill the marriage and destroy the children still living inside it. She also believed my father would deny everything and paint her as cruel or unstable. The longer she waited, the heavier the truth became. That answer disturbed me because it was so familiar. It sounded like the logic families use when protecting a lie becomes easier than confronting it. No one makes one dramatic decision to preserve deception forever. They just keep postponing the moment of honesty until the lie hardens into structure. By the third day, we had a name. Not the name she was born with. The name she had grown up with. Anna Mercer. She was 20 years older than me. She lived in another state. She worked as a speech therapist in a public school district. The fact that she was real in such specific ways felt almost unbearable. A job, a city, a set of records and addresses and verifiable traces of ordinary life. For 20 years, my mother had mourned an abstraction. Now her daughter had become concrete. My mother asked for a photograph. The agency could not provide one directly, but Claire found a professional staff page online with Anna's headshot on it. I still remember the exact silence that followed when the picture loaded. She looked like my mother. Not vaguely. Not in some sentimental, projected way. She had the same mouth, the same brow, the same serious eyes we had all seen in the mirror of our own family. My mother touched the screen with trembling fingers and said, "That's my face." Then she said something even harder. She said, "She should have known us." My father left the room at that point. Not dramatically. He just stood up and walked out to the back porch. I watched him through the glass door for a moment. He looked like a man who had spent years mastering denial only to discover that facts have a patience guilt does not. The agency told us contact had to be handled carefully. Anna had the right to decline. She had the right to ignore us. She had the right to ask questions we might not be able to answer cleanly. That seemed fair. It also terrified my mother. Claire helped draft the first letter. My mother wrote most of it. She did not write like someone introducing herself. She wrote like someone stepping out of a grave built by other people's decisions. She told Anna she had never abandoned her, never chosen separation, never known the truth until now. The letter was revised a dozen times. Every sentence felt too much or not enough. How do you explain to a stranger that she is not a stranger at all? How do you summarize 20 years of stolen motherhood without making it sound unbelievable? How do you ask for contact without sounding entitled to forgiveness? We sent the letter through the agency. Then came the waiting. Waiting is its own kind of violence when the stakes are emotional. My mother barely ate. Claire became more protective than I had ever seen her. And my father existed in the house like a problem no one could solve. He tried, once, to apologize properly. He said he had been young, afraid, and selfish. He said he told himself he was making a practical decision in a moment of crisis. He said that after enough time passed, he believed reopening the truth would only create more pain. My mother listened. Then she asked him whether he had ever once imagined her holding her daughter as a grown woman, whether he had ever pictured birthdays lost, graduations missed, illness and heartbreak, and every ordinary thing a mother would want to witness. He had no answer. I was angrier than I expected to be. At first, my shock had been abstract, but as the waiting stretched on, anger took its place. Not only for my mother, but for myself and Claire too. He had not only taken a daughter from her mother, he had taken a sister from us. He had rewritten our family tree and called it protection. That was the part exposed stories media often understands better than people living inside these stories do. Secrets do not affect one relationship. They alter the architecture of an entire family. One lie at the center forces everyone else to live in rooms that were built crooked. 10 days later, the agency called. Anna had received the letter. She had read it twice, and she wanted a phone conversation before deciding anything else. My mother nearly dropped the phone when we told her. The call was scheduled for the following evening. No one in the house could focus on anything else. Claire wrote down possible questions. My mother ignored them. She said she did not want a script. She wanted her daughter. The call itself lasted 37 minutes. I know because I watched the time from the hallway while giving my mother privacy and failing completely to relax. At first, her voice sounded formal and small. Then, gradually, human. Then shattered. Afterward, she came out of the bedroom with swollen eyes and a face full of astonishment. Anna had always suspected something was incomplete in her adoption story. Her adoptive parents had told her she was loved and chosen, but some paperwork never fully matched the explanations. When she became an adult, she tried to find answers and was told the records were limited. She eventually stopped looking because dead ends can become their own kind of grief. Then my mother's letter arrived. Anna had questions, of course. Hard questions. But she had not rejected us. She wanted to meet. The first meeting was set for a neutral place 2 weeks later. No one expected my father to come, and no one invited him. That fact made him seem smaller than any argument could have. For once, he could not define the terms of what happened next. In the days leading up to the meeting, another truth emerged. Anna had a younger brother in her adoptive family who knew nothing about any of this. Her adoptive mother had died years earlier. Her adoptive father was alive but frail, and Anna did not want to shock him with chaos before she understood more herself. That detail changed my view of everything again. This was not a simple reunion story. This was not a clean emotional arc where lost family is found and everyone collapses into grateful tears. This was one woman's life colliding with another family's buried crime. When the day came, we drove 3 hours to meet her. My mother sat in the passenger seat holding the old photograph from Anna's staff page, even though she no longer needed it. Claire drove. I sat in the back trying to imagine what a first glance at an unknowingly missing sister would do to me. Nothing prepared me. Anna looked like us and not like us. She carried herself differently, spoke differently, belonged to another set of memories. But the resemblance was undeniable. Claire cried first. My mother could barely breathe. The meeting was gentle and devastating. Anna was composed in the way people become composed when they have had to build emotional structure for themselves. She listened carefully. She asked factual questions first. Dates, hospital names. Who knew? Who lied? My mother answered everything she could. Then Anna asked the question none of us wanted. She asked whether our father had ever looked for her. My mother said no. Anna nodded once and stared down at her hands for several seconds. That reaction hurt more than anger would have. A person can argue with rage. Quiet acknowledgement is harder. She did not say she forgave him. She did not say she hated him. She said something much more difficult. She said he made a permanent decision for all of us because it was easier for him. That sentence defined the whole secret better than anything else had. By the end of the meeting, Anna agreed to continue contact. Not instantly, not casually, carefully. She said she wanted time, truth, and no manipulation. We all knew exactly who that last condition was for. The aftermath of the truth was not one dramatic collapse. It was slower than that. More practical, more invasive. The kind of fallout that enters every room of a family and changes how people sit in it. For my mother, the first stage was grief in reverse. She had spent 20 years grieving a child she believed had died. Now she had to grieve the years that child had lived without her. It was a different pain entirely. She kept saying the same kinds of things. I should have known. I should have felt something. I should have pushed harder. Claire and I kept telling her the truth had been stolen from her, not overlooked by her. Still, guilt is stubborn. It enters wherever love finds an opening. My mother began revisiting old birthdays, old breakdowns, old moods she had never fully understood in herself. She wondered whether her body had been holding knowledge her mind was denied. For Claire, the aftermath came as relief mixed with fury. She no longer had to carry the secret alone, but now she had to live with the fact that she had protected the timing of its revelation for years. Even though she had done so out of loyalty to Grandma's request, the burden had shaped her life. I saw it in the way she looked at my father. There was no confusion left in her expression, no daughterly hesitation, only judgment sharpened by time. As for me, the truth altered my relationship to memory. I started replaying childhood scenes with new suspicion. Every time my father grew distant around anniversaries. Every time my mother looked hollow for reasons no one named. Every time Claire seemed older than her age. Now those moments had a hidden center. My father tried, in those first weeks, to remain present. He cooked dinner twice. He asked whether anyone needed anything. He moved around the house with the stiff politeness of a man trying to perform usefulness in the ruins of his own credibility. No one responded normally. You can coexist with a person after betrayal long before you know how to relate to them again. That was what life became. Shared space. No trust. Anna and my mother kept talking. At first it was through phone calls and long messages. Then visits. Slowly, new memories began forming on top of the old theft. Anna came to our house for the first time 6 weeks after the initial meeting. My father was not there. My mother had asked him to leave for the weekend, and to his credit, he did. Anna said she was not ready to see him. None of us argued. That first visit felt strange in the most human way. She stood in the kitchen where she should have grown up learning family habits. She looked at framed photographs in which she should have existed. She laughed once at a childhood story Claire told and then went quiet because the missing years were suddenly all over the room. My mother showed her old baby clothes she had kept for too long without knowing why she could not throw them away. Anna cried when she touched them, not because fabric has power on its own, but because proof matters. Even small proof, especially when your life has been split by someone else's lie. Over time, practical questions replaced some of the raw shock. Did Anna want a relationship with all of us or only with Mom and Claire? Did she want medical history? Did she want to meet extended relatives? Did she want to hear our father explain himself? That last question lingered for months. Eventually, she said yes, not because she needed closure in the sentimental sense, because she wanted facts directly from the person who made the choice. She said if she never heard him speak, the story would keep expanding in her imagination. The meeting happened in my aunt's living room because no one wanted the symbolism of our family house. My father arrived early. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, structurally, as if exposure had stripped away a layer he had used all his life to hold authority. Anna entered with my mother and Claire. I stayed too, partly because she asked me to and partly because by then I understood I was witness to a history larger than my own anger. For the first several minutes, no one sat down. It felt less like a family conversation and more like the opening of a deposition. Anna asked him why. Not why he had the affair. Not why the marriage had been strained. Why he took a living child from her mother and called it mercy. My father tried at first to describe circumstance, pressure, fear, youth, shame. Anna stopped him. She said those were conditions, not reasons. Then, for the first time, he said something that sounded less like self-protection and more like truth. He said he was afraid that if the baby survived, everything he had built would collapse. The marriage, the reputation, the image of control. He chose what allowed him to keep functioning inside the version of his life he wanted. There it was. Not nobility, not confusion, self-interest sharpened by cowardice. The center of the secret had never been complexity. It had been convenience. Anna listened without interrupting. Then she said, very calmly, "You grieved nothing. The rest of us grieved what you stole." No one in the room had a better sentence than that. After that meeting, something changed. Not forgiveness, not resolution, clarity, the kind that does not heal by itself but at least stops the bleeding caused by confusion. Anna did not build a relationship with my father. She allowed limited contact later, mostly through letters at first. She said she wanted honesty without performance. If he wrote, he had to write plainly. He did. Those letters were the only place I ever saw him admit the full moral scale of what he had done. Not because he became noble suddenly, but because by then he had run out of places to hide. Truth had cornered him at last. Our family did not return to what it had been. That is an important part of stories like this, and one exposed stories media often reveals with more honesty than people like to admit. Truth does not restore innocence. It creates a new reality. The work is learning how to live in it without turning away again. My mother changed the most visibly. She became less accommodating, less eager to smooth over discomfort. She had spent decades living inside damage she could not name. Once it had a name, she stopped apologizing for her pain. Claire softened in some ways and hardened in others. She was more open with me than ever before. But with our father, she kept a disciplined distance that never really faded. She said some relationships are not ended by one act alone, but by what that act reveals about character. I understood that. As for Anna, she entered our lives carefully and on her own terms. She did not want replacement history. She did not want to be used as proof that everything turned out fine. She wanted the ordinary dignity of truth. That shaped all of us. Birthdays changed. Photographs changed. Language changed. My mother no longer referred to the baby we lost. She said Anna's name. That alone felt revolutionary. 2 years later, we took our first family photograph with all 4 of us siblings together. It is one of the strangest and most beautiful objects in my life. Not because it erases what happened, because it proves that a lie can shape a family for decades without owning the end of its story. Still, there are things that never healed cleanly. Extended relatives took sides in subtle ways. Some insisted the past should be left alone. Some thought exposing the truth after 20 years was crueler than preserving the lie. I learned to distrust anyone who values comfort above reality. My father eventually moved into a small townhouse on the edge of town. He and my mother never divorced, but they never returned to marriage as it had been either. They built a different kind of arrangement, one based less on romance than on age, history, and practical coexistence. Some people will not understand that. I am not sure I do either. What I do understand is this. Family secrets do not stay buried because they are too painful to reveal. They stay buried because someone benefits from the silence, usually more than one person. And the longer the silence lasts, the more sacred it starts to appear. That is why stories like this matter. Because they remind us that peace built on deception is not peace at all. It is only delay, and delay, when measured in years, becomes theft. If there is one lesson this story left in me, it is that truth is not the opposite of love. Secrecy often claims to be love, protection, mercy, stability. But real love does not require someone else's life to be rewritten in order to survive. My father's lie changed every one of us. It deprived my mother of a daughter, Anna of her origins, Claire of a normal sisterhood, and me of a family history I could trust. But once it came out, it also gave us something back. Not innocence, something more useful, accuracy. And from accuracy, strangely enough, real relationship became possible. Not easy relationship, not complete relationship. Real relationship, the kind built after illusions are gone. That is the thing about family truths. They rarely emerge at a convenient time. They rarely make people admirable in the moment. But when they finally surface, they give everyone involved one last chance to stop living inside a story written by fear. If this story stayed with you, that may be because somewhere in it you recognized something larger than one family. That is why exposed stories media exists. Not simply to shock, but to show what silence costs, what truth disrupts, and what people sometimes become when they finally stop protecting the wrong story. And if there is a secret somewhere in your own life that has been mistaken for stability, remember this. Time does not purify deception. It only deepens its roots. But even after 20 years, the truth can still come out. And when it does, it may break a family apart for a while. But it may also be the first honest thing that family has lived through in a very long time.